Hey everyone, Vincenzo Calla here. Welcome to Let's Discuss Politics, Episode 8. Today, I'm glad to be joined by the Ndp Mpp for Ottawa Centre, Joel Harden. Joel was first elected in 2018 to be the MPP for Ottawa Centre, beating out the incumbent MPP. Before being elected, Joel was a researcher with the Canadian Federation of Students. He also taught at the Carleton University Department of Law and Legal Studies, among many other things. Joel is currently the official opposition critic for seniors, accessibility, and people with disabilities. Thank you, Joel, for joining me today.
It's a pleasure, Vincenzo. Nice to talk to you.
It's great to have you here. And if anybody's been paying attention to my social media and all that, I'm currently trying to interview all the Ottawa area MPPs ahead of the June election, and you're my first guest from Ottawa. So thank you for joining. So we're gonna start with the first segment, which is called Joel's Story, where we'll talk about your political history. So the first question is, when did you first get involved in politics?
So I've been involved in politics for a long time. Electoral politics as a candidate, as an elected politician, much more recent. We're talking about since the 2018 campaign, the year and a half previous to that, as we were getting ready for that vote on June 7th, 2017. But I've been active in politics for a long time, but more active in community movements, working with a number of different charities, nonprofits, social movements at a local level to try to push people in positions like mine to do the right thing. So I've been on the other side of the ledger for a very long time. I would say I probably got my start in Kingston when I was an undergraduate student, working on various issues, passionate back then about queer and trans rights. But when I moved to Toronto, it really opened up a new world for me. As a small town kid originally, met people, went to school with people from all over the world. And as a student of politics, really broadened my horizons and met people like Jack Layton and Olivia Chow. And they convinced me that there were elected representatives who really cared what community movements wanted to accomplish. So they were the people, they were my gateway into the NDP, as it were.
Well, I mean, those are two very strong NDP legends, if you could call them legends. I would say they're legends in Canadian politics for sure. And really, it's important that we have MPPs, MPs, and elected officials similar to your story, where they worked in the community level and understand those issues that are happening, so that when you become the elected official, you know what is important to the community.
Mhm.
And that's pretty much your job as an elected official in the legislature, and your federal colleagues in the House of Commons. That's just what it is, representing the people and changing things that need to be changed.
Well, I would not to quibble with you too much, Vincenzo, but I would say our first objective, if we're doing the job really well, is to listen. And I think that was implicit in what you said earlier. If we're tied in and if we're paying attention and listening to what people in the community need, then we're going to represent them well. But if we think that we have all the answers, that everything we say in legislatures is what should happen, I think that's when politics can sometimes run adrift of what the community actually needs and wants. So most people I know across all parties really want to be rooted into what is happening at a community level. And that's certainly what I've tried to do for a long time, when my job was to push politicians to do the right thing. And now, as that person, to do my best to be a mirror to reflect what the community wants in the legislature.
For sure. And we already kind of touched on this, but we'll go into the next question, which is, why did you decide to run for the position you want to hold? Especially, why did you run to be an MPP for Ottawa Centre?
So I was talked into it. I'll be honest with you. For years, I've been asked, and my answer was always the same. Aren't there enough overeducated white guys in politics? Can't we do our part? People who look like me, who have my history, to encourage more diversity in politics. That was always a very useful debating trick I would play upon friends of mine who said, you should run. But what really cinched it for me this time were a few things. I had some very articulate friends, even members of my own family, tell me that the way I liked doing politics, the collaborative, community-focused way of doing politics, where it wasn't about the politician talking about my office, my staff, my riding, my this, my that. I was very interested in using parliamentary resources to bring them back down to the community, so the community could get the resources, the wins they deserved. People really like that. And I learned that from people like Jack Layton and Olivia Chow and many others since. And they wanted that kind of organizing approach to be implicit in an MPP office here in Ottawa Centre. And so I got talked into it, I'll be honest with you. And then when I got a sense of the enormity of the task, like just securing the nomination, was a very competitive process. We had a room full of 650 New Democrats, 4 people on the ballot, 3 ballots in order to preside as the winning candidate in that race. That was really difficult. A lot of conversations. And then, my goodness, running against a sitting attorney general who's articulate, respected in the community like Yasser Naqvi, that was not easy. But, along the way, I think we learned a lot of lessons about raising people's expectations, about listening to people, but demanding more from politics. We said that a lot. And that resonated. People did want to demand more from politics. And I sure hope they're going to want to demand more from politics in 2022.
Well, I'm not going to spend too much time on this because I've talked a lot about it in my other interviews. But the thing with elections and kind of what you were saying is it's the chance for people to get more from their politicians, to choose someone that they think that will listen to their needs. And especially for you in Ottawa Centre, you have a giant community. You have, like you said, it was a very tight race for you, and the people decided to choose you as their candidate and then the MPP. So it's very important. And again, like you said, to listen to the people and to do what the people elected you to do. And we're going to bring that into the next segment, which is called Serving as an Elected Official, where we'll talk about your experiences and achievements as an elected official over the past couple of years. So the first question is, what is your favorite part about serving your community as an elected official?
Oh, well, without question, and COVID has made it harder, getting out into the community and watching the work people are doing on a daily basis, hourly basis, I would even say, here in Ottawa Centre. There are so many people engaged in compassionate work at a local level, scraping and clawing for resources. And when you're out in the community for even a moment, you realize how important it is as a politician to get access to resources for those people, access to publicity for those people, access to donors and volunteers for those folks. So that's my favorite part. I mean, we have a wonderful riding that I think most people think about Ottawa as just a federal government town where a lot of people make decent salaries and work for the federal government. That's a part of our community. We also have the most rooming houses per capita than anywhere in Ottawa. There's a lot of poverty. There's a lot of people in difficult situations, and we're all supposed to support each other. So that's my favorite part, Vincenzo, is getting out to the community, watching people do amazing work, and then doing what we can to help.
Well, that's for sure a very important part of being an MPP. And, I think that by having people that are currently elected being out in the community, and again, we're going to get back to the listening and seeing what the issues the community has and how they can help and how they can do their part as an elected official is just so important, that every elected official, no matter the party, no matter if it's on the local level, the provincial or the federal level, that's something that everybody needs to work towards and needs to remember as an elected official. So we're going to go into the next question, which is, what is your favorite achievement as an elected official?
Yeah, I would say without a question, it was when we passed a private member's motion in the legislature called VCalla's Law, and your listeners should look it up. It was inspired by a woman in the riding just west of us in Ottawa, West Nepean, Vula Sardellis, who was separated from her daughter, Mary, for 319 days. And it was because the owner of a retirement home had utilized the Trespass to Property Act in such a way as to suggest that the daughter was creating a disturbance in the home, and therefore the owner had the right to forbid the daughter from entering into the property. So what I've learned from a lot of research, legislative research, work with Mary and other family caregivers, is that that's actually an unlawful use of the Trespass Act. We need, most owners of retirement homes, long-term care homes, group homes work to diffuse conflict when conflict happens, because it's a part of life. I mean, that will happen. Disagreements will happen between people who run assisted living facilities and families and residents. But forbidding a senior, particularly a senior living with dementia like Mary, access to her daughter was a truly, truly awful situation. And this is something shared by dozens and dozens of other families across the province, perhaps hundreds of families. I feel sometimes like we just touch the tip of the iceberg. So what private members' bills can do, as you know, and many of your listeners may know, they can become legislation, like a private member's bill, or they can become a motion where the legislature simply unites around an affirmation of a particular idea. And what VCalla's Law, we called it that just for effect, for communications effect, did. It was a motion saying that there should be no unreasonable means by which family members, caregivers should be separated from their loved ones in assisted living facilities. And it got unanimous support in the House. So Minister Cho, the minister for whom I'm the critic, Raymond Cho, the Honorable Raymond Cho, actually spoke in favor of Vuli's law. Parliamentary Assistant Daisy Way, who works as Minister Cho's parliamentary assistant, also a member of provincial parliament, spoke in favor of the legislation. So I think, that was actually a great moment for me, because most of the time when I'm down to the legislature, we're scratching and gouging each other's eyes out in debate and really having at it, because that's the thrust of politics, the cut and thrust of politics. But it was a really high moment for me where we made a collective recognition that family caregivers have rights and residents have rights, particularly with what we saw in COVID. So it was great to see that passed. And what that's led to since is a lot of advocacy from our office, because as you said, we're the persons with disabilities critic for the province. We want to make sure the visitors guidelines for all care homes reflect the intent of Vuli's law, that it becomes part of the laws and the rights and obligations for everybody in the province. So we're still at that, but that was a big win.
Well, that's a really interesting story for sure. And it's more than a story, it's an actual movement, kind of like what you were talking about. You could say it's a movement. And it's just so important that people don't get caught up in, kind of like what I was talking with my guest last week. People don't get caught up in the theater of parliament, in the theater of legislature. And I know it's hard sometimes. We see kind of like the butting heads of legislature, but there's also the things like you were speaking about, how you can unite in a topic if it's of importance, like what you were saying, and just working together to across party lines, even just to get it done. And like you were just talking about, it got done, and it's just so important.
Agree. Now, that's not to say conflict is bad. Conflict's good for democracy. We're not the kind of country that will suppress our differences. So we probably most of the time we're going to be arguing on television, and that's
how things get done. That's how things get done and fixed.
It's true. But that was a good moment. And there, I've seen other moments. My colleague Percy Hatfield from Windsor-Tecumseh passed a poet laureate bill for Ontario in the memory of Gord Downey, the great legendary frontman for the Tragically Hip, which will now empower a poet laureate to go across the province and get communities interested in poetry into the arts. I think that was a great all-partisan initiative.
That's really cool. And we're going to go into the next question, which is the next segment, which is politics are all around us, where we'll talk about the world of politics around us and just how it plays a role in our lives. So we've kind of touched on this, but the first question is, who is or who was another politician that inspires you?
Well, I think I have to go right back to Jack and Olivia, and a brief note as to why. I was probably a very skeptical graduate student when Jack Layton first walked into a classroom at York University, and I heard him describe what he was working on as a city councillor at City Hall, and how he was trying to convince a very conservative mayor, Mel Lastman, that he needed to invest a significant amount of money to take people off the street, but also to get them housed. It was something called the housing first strategy. And he was well aware that New Democrats, lefties, are very good at making the ethical case for things, but he was encouraging us to make the fiscal case about why it's important to end homelessness, why it's better for the human being who is homeless, but also better for the province, for the country, if we're not spending money on police cruisers, ambulances, jails, emergency rooms to help people who are living with trauma and living in distress. I thought he was naive at the time. I thought this would be a fruitless exercise, but when I went down to City Hall and saw Jack make these arguments, and not just Jack, people who'd lived this life, talk about how their life was remade, how they got a new chance to be a different person. I could see, I've been in meetings, I'm sure you have too, Vincenzo, because you're politically active. When you reach a certain level of politics, people sit very ramrod straight and they're very serious and they stare across the table at their apparent adversary. And that's how the meeting started. You saw the mayor's staff, the mayor was there for a very short period of time, just kind of say, okay, I'm going to put up with this because I was told to. But after deposition, when people were speaking about their lives, you saw the shoulders kind of hunch forward, and you saw people reckoning with the fact that there was a really valuable point being made here, that there's no reason for us to have a homelessness emergency in our cities. It remains to this day. In our city, as you know, Vincenzo, we have
especially in Ottawa,
sleeping outside every night, sleeping in bus shelters, sleeping in cars.
Just minutes from Parliament too.
Absolutely. So I saw, that I earned a great. I won't pretend to tell you that Jack and I agreed on everything. We didn't, but I actually think he demonstrated that it was important to summon political will around powerful ideas, and that can move significant forces. And in this case, the city of Toronto, I saw him do the same thing, worm his way into the hearts of people as stoic and strong as Prime Minister Harper, around the formal apology for the residential schools. Jack did a lot of that work and took none of that credit. What was more important for him was making sure that those Indigenous communities heard those words from the Prime Minister. And I think that was very significant. So I model myself on that kind of public service. It's not about seeking credit and hogging for the limelight, but getting things done.
Well, that's definitely a good story, definitely worth listening to, and definitely worth looking at more if you're interested in seeing that, because homelessness is an issue that is so important to this day that still happens. And we'll go over it we'll go over another issue quickly, but it's just so important that you do what is right. And just, I'll leave it at that, because it's just so important to do what is right. So we'll quickly go over the last question, which is, what do you think is an issue that needs to be focused on more? So just
well, I spoke about housing and homelessness. I think I also have to speak about the climate crisis and reconciliation. I'll try to do them both very quickly. We are really used in this country to saying very nice words when we begin official political events, acknowledging the land on which we sit, but I find the political commitment often ends after there, and we don't take concrete steps about what reconciliation actually means. And we saw the Prime Minister, our current Prime Minister, recently step in it around, the TRC official day, like on the day, despite being invited by communities, including in Kamloops, that saw the revelations around the graves of children there that began this conversation in our country. Effectively take the day off. He's apologized for it, and I take that apology for what it is. That's fair enough. But we're really good at words in politics. We're not so good at action often. So I would like to see concrete action where Indigenous communities are in the lead, shared governance. And two things I'd point out on this front as progress. One, here in Ottawa, Victoria Island, which, if listeners aren't aware of it, is a sacred place for Algonquin and Anishinaabe peoples. If you're going towards the War Museum on Booth Street, you look to your right, it's right there. It's a site that's been contaminated by industrial pollution for a number of years, so the federal government decided to close it temporarily and to think about how it could be remediated. And they've just recently contracted an Algonquin and Anishinaabe construction company, DeConti Construction, from Kitigan-Zibi First Nation, to lead the remediation efforts with the National Capital Commission. That's action. That's putting money and economic opportunity into the hands of people who not only have the technical expertise, but the philosophical and ancestral expertise. That's leadership. That's fantastic. In an hour, I'm on my way to the renaming of the formerly known Sir John A. Macdonald Parkway path that the City of Ottawa has recognized. This legacy, as much as Sir John A. was our first Prime Minister, he said and did things that I believe would horrify most Canadians. And we have to reckon with the fact that requires us to make these, they seem symbolic, but to make these physical changes. So I don't really have time to fit in climate change on that front. Why don't I just stick with reconciliation and say actions matter more than words. We have a number of boil water advisories here in Ontario. I'm very proud to be a colleague of MPP Saul Mamakwa, way up from Kiwetanong in the northwest corner of the province, who, when he speaks in the legislature, Vincenzo, you can hear a pin drop. Everybody puts their phones down and listens. And it's because that's a colleague bringing firsthand expertise about what we can do to build on the good model we've done recently in collaboration with Kitigan-Zibi and DeConti Construction at Victoria Island, work we're doing on the formerly known as SJAM Parkway that will be renamed today historically here in the City of Ottawa. Much more work to do, but I would like to see that continue with action and projects as opposed to speechifying.
Definitely. And really, the path to reconciliation is not just words, like you're saying, it's action. It's taking real action, not just doing a land acknowledgement every morning before you start school or work. It's actually doing the right thing and doing your part, doing your absolute part to come to it, and just create reconciliation in the best way you can. So that is all. Thanks, Joel, for joining me today. If you like today's interview, make sure to check my other interview with Joel on Instagram for top 5 and 5. If you're watching this on the premiere date, it's going to come out on Friday. To stay updated, make sure to follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at VC Productions 25. Check my website out at vincenzocalla.com. Make sure to like and subscribe and click the notification bell here on YouTube. Let's Discuss Politics is a VCalla production. So until the next video, I'm Vincenzo Calla, signing out.